What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to take a trip down cringe memory lane and look at my old street photography. This is when I first started street photos. I didn't even realize that it was street photography at the time. I was just calling it candid photos and posting it on Facebook. So I've got all these wonderful old albums we can go through, and they're quite revealing, quite embarrassing, and actually give an interesting reflection of how my style has changed. So we're gonna jump in with the oldest and most embarrassing one. Also, we're gonna be reflecting on Facebook and how that used to be a platform that people actually used back when life wasn't as curated as it is now. Little backstory on this album. This is my first time ever shooting street photography. It is 2012. I go up to my local town center as a 14-year-old in Virginia and just try to take awkward, embarrassing photos of people. I didn't even know what street photography was at the time. I didn't have any grand intentions, but I thought it'd be a funny experiment, and that's what it was. This album has about 40 photos, which is about 39 too many. There's maybe a few gems in here, but for the most part, out of focus, kind of boring. I think that my main goal when I was shooting these was just to get interesting people with no real intention about composition or style. It was just look for someone of any sort of interest. If I remember correctly, I think that there were hundreds that I shot, and this was my attempt at curation. I think this is a funny reflection of how social media has changed over time, because casually uploading 40 photos on Facebook seems crazy now. And I think about how much deliberation I put into uploading a 3 to 5 photo set on Instagram. So Facebook was once so much less curated. I felt like it was really our true selves. And I don't know if that was because our cynicism has just increased and we've become more disenfranchised with social media over time, or if I was just an awkward middle schooler, early high schooler who had no filter, and these kids nowadays also have no filter. It's probably that, actually. So maybe it's just a story of my own maturation as a person. But out of focus shots, a lot of people just making unflattering faces. I do like this one because I clearly was catching reactions of people seeing me photograph them, which is something that I still do today. That's one of my favorite moments in a street photo, is that just how someone reacts with surprise. This is just an embarrassing shot. I don't know what I was going for here. I do respect a man who double fists his water bottles. This is a little bit more fun. I also remember shooting a lot of photos of people mid-bite, which is an easy way to make someone look very unflattering. Yeah, it looks like I didn't really move around a lot, just letting people come to me. Still a strategy I use, but in general, I'm just very bored by these photos. And I think that that is one of the biggest problems with beginner street photography, because you think about beginner, any other types of photos. Beginner landscapes, you're like, all right, well, even if the photo's unspectacular, you're still seeing a nice landscape. It's kind of nice. Beginner street photos are about as boring as they'll ever get, because it's just, nothing is happening. The composition is lame. Your eye for people isn't that great yet. So it's just, everything is unspectacular in the photo. But obviously, when you're a beginner at photography and you're trying anything new, the photos aren't going to be spectacular at first. So this is a really cool starting point, and it's neat to see how I was experimenting, where my mind initially jumped to. I just wish that it was better curated and not public on Facebook. That's horrific. This is actually kind of a gem. I like this. There's a religious element here, some sort of story. I wish that I was brave enough to capture these people as they were coming toward me and get their faces and not shoot them from behind like any scared beginner street photographer would, but maybe the most interesting people that I encountered that day. Okay, and this begins the portion of the set where I camped outside of a Chipotle and photographed people exiting, which is kind of funny. There's the occasional gem. This is like the spite that you get when someone realizes that you're shooting their photo. So yeah, there's a couple of shots that I don't completely hate in this. I'd say this and the religious family, but in general, it's a lot of just mundaneness. Okay, this is actually sick. I'm happy that I got this one. It's surprisingly in focus, and I will say a lot of the shots that I'm having, the composition is just very empty. And by empty, I mean it's a wide shot, not much happening in it except for one person. And I think that one person as a central point in a composition is totally fine, but it's nice when they are the entirety of the photo, like this, where this little kid makes up the shot. You have the legs of the adult, so it's really decontextualized. You're kind of in this kid's world for a second, as opposed to a way more zoomed out photo would make this a lot less exciting. And that's what most of the photos in this series are. So yeah, nothing too exciting. People picking their teeth. Like, it's kind of a cheap trick, and I feel like a little weird about trying to de-glamorize people, if you will. I love a good street photo where the people in it just look absolutely glamorous, and you could tell that they'd be excited to see the photo if they were in it. Not something like this where the person is sort of the butt of the joke. It feels yeah, a little cheap and disrespectful. Though I'm not opposed to having people be the butt of the joke in my photos. In fact, that's a common theme that I still shoot today. This photo is actually kind of cool. This was taken in the back alley of a restaurant, and these are the workers on break. There's like a little bit of energy there. There's a slight story, which I dig. What is this man drinking from? Please tell me it's a flask. Probably not. Okay, it's probably just a mug. Yeah, it's got a little more energy than the others, and of course a random skate photo of me in DC. Nothing like a good uncategorized set. Now, this is 2012 in April. I turned 14 4 days after taking these. So let's go to a slightly newer set and see how the style changes. In general, I'm gonna give that a 2 out of 10, but a thumbs up for any beginner who's getting started. We are now gonna enter Candid Photography round 2. So I guess I was getting a little bit more confident. This album was taken in September of 2012. So a little bit of time to refine my style. And immediately I'm like, okay, this is a fun shot. Obviously it's an awkward moment for a person, but looks like a little bit more of a moment than anything else I've taken. Unflattering, cheap tricks. Okay, I'm noticing there is a certain boldness to this set that I didn't have in the last one. You can tell that I'm getting a little bit closer to my subjects, being a little more risky, and I love that that's still kind of how I shoot. So it's fun to know that the boldness started so early on. Yeah, I don't like these unflattering face shots at all, but it was an experiment, and these experiments have to be done, honestly, and I feel like I learned a lesson. Ugh, the tongue. No one looks good mid-lick on anything. And all right, even though these are not the best and it's a little bit embarrassing that this is what I started my street photography with, this does really feel like an important lesson. And I think that I learned how to be brash from doing this, and it was like a very important stepping stone of being comfortable. If you can photograph someone at their most embarrassing, least flattering moments, then you can probably photograph someone who looks kind of cool a lot easier. So I am a big proponent for taking it too far so that you're more comfortable with the middle ground. And I talk about this all the time when I give advice for people shooting street photography. If you're new or curious to shoot street photography, you should definitely check out my tutorial, How to Photograph Strangers, right over here. I actually give sound advice, and it doesn't involve photographing people's tongue, to build up your confidence as a street photographer. This one's kind of fun. It's nice to see kids in the summertime, kids petting dogs. Okay, this is probably the best image in the set because this to me actually feels like a moment. The kid is mid-flail. Obviously I was wimpy and photographed it from behind. I think my modern self, if I really wanted to capture this, I would sprint ahead and try and let them run into me again. But I definitely didn't have that wherewithal. See, this sucks, but it's also great and hysterical, but it sucks. I was such a 14-year-old. I just don't know why I even included something like this. I think it was just look at these characters, which is a fun way to collect images. It wasn't really about the photos. It was truly just about the people in the photos, which feels like a very innocent, fun way to approach photography. And I honestly, I kind of miss that joyous naivete, if you will. That said, it's fine. I got a little bolder. I curated a little bit more with 27 photos instead of 39. But let's skip ahead a little bit because I actually have some interesting sets I want to show you. Now I want to go through the Gold Cup Candids, and this was shot in May of 2013. So I am a sophisticated 15-year-old now who has nuanced photographic taste and has refined his style immensely over the last year. Probably not, but that's the hope. So I'm gonna scroll through these really quick because I have just a ton, and immediately, same thing, definitely just photographing interesting people without much of a thought about composition, but you're seeing the composition improve just a little bit, slightly more center framed. I'm getting a little bit closer to people, and you can see that confidence starting to come into my photos. Obviously the same lack of curation. For those that don't know, the Gold Cup is a horse race in Virginia where people dress about as swanky and bougie as possible, which is such a fun event to photograph. I need to do that again. This shot I actually really like. I would have obviously wanted to crop this girl out and maybe this porta potty out. Or maybe the porta potty is what makes it magical. I do love a good porta potty. But yeah, this is fun. This is a very particular energy that you're only gonna find at horse races. I'm gonna say this is a winning photo. Boring, more, so many tongues. It's my high school gym teacher, that's great. Weird to see him there. So much tongue. This is kind of fun. This is a real moment here. I think that everything else is just people smoking cigars, doing this very like self-aware thing. Like they want to be seen looking glamorous, smoking a cigar. That's the shot that they want taken of them. This seems like mid temper tantrum or breakdown, which I like. It actually feels like a candid moment. Yeah, a lot of very like, this is a cool person. I can see why my 15-year-old self was attracted to this photo. Photographically, it's not really scratching that itch for me anymore. Yeah, very boring. Okay, this shot rips. I really dig this shot. And it's the same thing, it's this closer composition, I think, that brings the shot together, where all the other shots just look like this busy scene where I happen to catch an interesting person amongst it. This looks like it could be a portrait, and it wasn't. I remember this being candid. I'm grateful for how close I managed to get. I dig that a lot. I think that I probably, if I were doing this again, would have gotten a little bit more to the right to try and frame out this girl in the bottom left-hand corner and just have his straight up body. But in general, this feels like a nice, clean shot. This man looks like he drinks a lot of extremely expensive wine, and I respect that aesthetic. This photo right here, they were clearly posing for a shot, and it doesn't look like they were posing for me because of their eye contact. Now, I think that these sort of shots where you break the fourth wall and show people posing for a photo are only strong if you break the fourth wall with enough gusto. So this reminds me of a shot I recently saw from Sebastian Siebecki. I think I'm saying his last name right, I have no idea. You have this distance where you really get an idea for the moment, including the photographer. This feels like they could have just been looking at something else and been distracted from a photo I was taking. So didn't do a very strong job on that, but definitely a powerful technique if done right. All right, I think I've seen enough from this set. We're gonna end this with one final set. This is from 2013, photographing my hometown's annual festival. And the fact that I said I apologize if you know these people in the caption is a good sign that I took some ridiculous photos. So people looking terrified, that's fun. You know, obviously I didn't really know how to edit. I was still editing in iPhoto at the time, doing really, really basic stuff. So you're gonna see some blown highlights and some very generic colors. That's just what it's gonna be. This is actually a fun image. I feel like there's a little bit of a story here. Obviously it's simple. I like that I was camping out at a spot where there was high action, and this girl looks like she's having quite a time. I'm actually a big fan of this shot, and this is nice. You can tell that I improved as a photographer because, one, they are in focus and they're sharp, and I used the right shutter speed, which feels like a win that we weren't seeing previously. I think that if I could adjust this now, I would love to actually bring down the highlights so you can see a little more of the sky and bring out the color there, and also bring out the detail in all these people. Also, my very anal style of loving super straight, clean lines had not developed yet clearly. I probably would have done perspective adjustments so that the ride makes these perfectly straight lines. I think that'd be super satisfying. People looking ridiculous, bored girl out of focus. This is, I'm not gonna comment here. I think this is hysterical though, in an unrefined photographic sense. Sweaty back, very simple shots, nothing too fun here. Again, unflattering people, same old for sure. Yeah. Nothing like the uncategorized, unfiltered set of a photographer that wants to include street photography next to long exposure photography. This is fun. I remember loving, I think this was like brilliant work at the time. Now I look at it, I'm like, wow, I sure love that warm white balance. I'm glad that I experimented with this. This feels like a really important thing that one has to do. As a self-employed photographer and skateboarder, you wouldn't think that I could be any more of a millennial than I already am, but I'm gonna actually one-up myself right now and recommend David Foster Wallace. I know that's ridiculous and I'm overdoing it right now, but he wrote a really great nonfiction piece called Getting Away From, already pretty much being away from it all, and it's a hysterical account of being at a fair, and he has a very in-depth account of this ride. This is the Zipper, which if you've been to a fairground throughout the country that has sketchy carnies and terrifying rides that might break down and kill you at any moment, then you may have ridden the Zipper. So hysterical piece. I'm probably gonna find a PDF to link in the description. This, I think, is actually the strongest image in the entire set. I love the way that this ride illuminates the power lines, and this industrial building which frames up this ride is also just really nice in that it feels like the boring industrial area of your town made exciting for one night of the fair. It feels like a very particular energy that a lot of people who've lived in unspectacular small towns can probably relate to, and this feels very simple and clean. There was probably puking that happened right after or during the moment that this photo was taken. And of course, I'm a sucker for long exposures and nice colors. So this is a winning photo, especially compared to all these other just very simple long exposure experimentation shots. I dig it, and it feels like a really nice place to end this video. So final thoughts on my old photography. First of all, I need to change the privacy settings on my Facebook. There is no reason why any of this should be public right now. Also, I feel like I'm happy with my old Instagram photos. It felt like the right amount of detached and curated, whereas my Facebook just feels like this really uncurated, honest, oversharing place for a while, which I'm not crazy about. I like the balance between curated Instagram and like a diary for my personal thoughts. I don't like that Facebook feels like this uncurated middle ground. Also, this reminds me of just how much I hate Facebook in the first place. I don't think I've accepted a friend request in the last year. It's also really cool to see my current style shining through in my old work. You could tell that I was really comfortable embarrassing myself, talking to strangers, and breaking that wall to turn a street photo shoot into a portrait shoot, something I still absolutely love to do. This makes me really grateful for good curation. I really appreciate how people share so much less now. There's just too much content being shared on Facebook. And lastly, I just want to show you guys the current setup I have to film this because it's kind of hysterical. This actually is highly functional. Lastly, leave a comment if you'd like to see a part 2. There are so many more old sets of photos I have on Facebook. I'm sure equally embarrassing, so let me know. And thank you all so much for watching. I will see you eventually.